Chris. Welcome to week 1 of our study on habits. We all have habits, right? Some are good, some are bad, but we all have these different behaviors that are a natural part of our life. Aristotle said it this way: we are what we repeatedly do. Yeah, he said we are what we repeatedly do. And so I guess if we're going to have a series on habits, it would only be fitting if I was honest and opened up with you about some of my own habits. So let's see, some of my good habits. Well, I like to shower pretty much every day. I'd say that's a good habit. My friends appreciate it. I guess you could just throw good hygiene into the mix. I brush my teeth and comb my hair. Another habit that I have that I really think is good and is important to me is I tell Leisha and my daughters every day that I love them. That one's a big one for me. But let's be real. While we all hopefully have some good habits in our life, if we're being honest, we know that we also have some not so good habits. Most people would call these bad habits. Here are a few of mine. You can't judge me, okay? I'm being vulnerable. I'm standing here and I'm sharing with you, so no judgment. One bad habit that I have is speeding. I tend to exceed the speed limit most of the time I'm behind the wheel. I just like to get where I'm going quicker than most people. Okay, I also have a bad habit of texting and driving. So apparently all of my bad habits are illegal. Hey, I said no judging. Let's see. I also have a bad habit of leaving my shoes in the living room. My wife, Leisha, is not a big fan of that habit. Sometimes I think it's nice for us to just hit restart. Just try and set some new habits in our life. And there's some obvious times to do this, right? A new year, New Year's resolutions are pretty popular. People feel like it's a fresh start. But I also think that it's a good time to hit reset and to restart some things when it's a new school year. Maybe you looked at your GPA from last year and you're thinking, man, it probably would be a good idea if I tried to develop some new habits in my life, like maybe going to class or actually studying. Those might be helpful habits. But even right now, whenever you're watching this, you have a chance to start fresh. No one's judging you, okay? No one is keeping score. And as we work our way through this series over the next few weeks, make the decision. Find some areas in your life where you can form some better habits. For some of you, the fact that you're even sitting in this circle is the beginnings of a new habit. You look back on last semester or high school or even this past summer, and maybe you recognize that you could probably stand to make some better choices. Maybe it's the people that you're hanging out with or the way that you spend your time. Habits shape who we are to our core. We're a product of the choices that we make. We're a product of what we repeatedly do. That's who we are. Just like Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Now, my hope for the next few weeks is that we'll go on a journey together towards becoming an iceberg. Sure, the top of an iceberg is beautiful. It's really something to look at. It might even attract attention. People stop and they take pictures. They make movies about icebergs. But it isn't just what people see above the surface that makes an iceberg so important. What makes an iceberg so formidable is the substance under the surface. It's the stuff that you can't see. And my hope is that we would have the kind of life where what is beneath the surface would grow in strength and maturity, that we would become the kind of person that God has called us to be. And so when we talk about habits during this series, we're not talking about the kind of habits that shape your grades or your morning routine or your muscles, okay? Those habits impact what we see above the surface. But we're going to look deeper. We're going to look at the kind of habits that shape what's happening beneath the surface, because this is the most important thing about you. What's beneath the surface is where your faith comes from. And our faith ultimately sets the foundation for our life. It's what we believe, or maybe what we don't believe. But it impacts how we act. It influences how we treat the people around us. Our faith has a profound impact on all the most important and sensitive areas of our life. And in just a minute, you're going to take some time to think about some different habits that you could put into practice that would be meaningful when it comes to your faith. But I want to highlight one habit first. And this may seem overly simplistic, and maybe it is, but the habit of spending time with God. See, here's the deal. You become what you behold. You become what you behold. And I've heard it said that you're a product of your 5 closest friends. Whoever you spend the most time around, they rub off on you. You become what you behold. So if we're trying to become the person that God has called us to be, we should work on creating a habit of beholding God. And maybe for you that seems weird. Chris, how do I behold God? I mean, how do I even spend time with God? Well, let's look at an example of someone who spent a lot of time with God. That person is Jesus. Mark 1:35 says, before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and he went out to an isolated place to pray. And then in Mark 6, it says, after telling everyone goodbye, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Luke 5, but Jesus often withdrew into the wilderness for prayer. Luke 6, one day soon afterward, Jesus went up on a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God all night. One of the ways that we can spend time with God is through prayer. Jesus spent a lot of time with God, and for him, it was a habit. Now, I'm not saying that you need to spend all night alone on a mountain, but I do think that there's something that we can learn from Jesus' example. Change doesn't come from God's desire for us. It doesn't even come from our desire. Change comes from habits. See, desire, it looks good, but there's nothing of substance there. It's what's above the surface. But we have to put action into it in order to actually create change. Now, over the next few weeks, I want to challenge you to make a new habit. Throughout this series, choose just one way that you're going to spend more time with God. Now, it doesn't have to be an entire night alone on a mountain. Maybe it's just 5 minutes of conversation, or talking with him while you walk outside. Or it's a decision to read just a few verses from your Bible each day. Experts agree that it takes at least 21 days to develop a new habit. And so I want to challenge you. Let's spend the rest of this series trying to develop a new habit or two together. Wherever you are in your relationship with God, decide to take one step closer to him. Time with God grows your relationship with him. So go spend time with God and then make it a habit. Now it's your turn. Tell your group about some of the habits that have shaped who you are. Sure, it may start with what you eat for breakfast every morning, but don't let the conversation end there. What are some habits that you think could help strengthen your faith in what's below the surface? Now it's time to circle up with your group and discuss, and I'll see you next week.